we've got our hands on an official tax document that, believe me, tells an incredible story. It's about how a massive tax bill didn't just disappear, it actually flipped into a refund. So let's break down exactly how that happened.
Okay, just imagine this for a second. You get an official-looking, stamped letter from the tax authority. You open it up, and inside is a bill for a huge amount of money. What's your first reaction? Probably a mix of panic and confusion, right? Well, for one taxpayer, this wasn't a hypothetical. This was real.
43,550,633 rupiah. For most of us, that's a staggering amount of money. A bill like this just floors you. You're immediately thinking, is this a mistake? How on earth could I ever pay this?
And to be clear, this wasn't some kind of warning or a preliminary estimate. No, this was an official Surat Tagihan Pajak, a formal tax collection letter. It was linked to a very specific tax period, making it a very real, very immediate problem. But, this story has a major twist. Just when it seemed like a total nightmare, the whole situation took a dramatic and, frankly, pretty amazing turn. Let's get into how this massive bill was officially wiped off the books.
So a little while later, a second official letter shows up. But this one had a completely different vibe. It was a Surat Keputusan Pembatalan, which is basically a decree of cancellation. You could say this document is the hero of our story because its entire job was to undo the first letter. The power of this entire legal decree really boils down to this one crucial word, membatalkan. It means to cancel. With that single word, a debt of over 43 million rupiah was officially gone. So the big question is, how on earth did that happen? This brings us to the really interesting part of this whole thing, understanding the process behind the reversal. It wasn't some kind of magic trick. It was actually a fascinating and maybe little-known feature of the tax system itself. Now, your first thought is probably the same as mine. The taxpayer must have had to lawyer up, file a bunch of complicated paperwork, and fight a long, drawn-out appeal, right? I mean, that's what you'd expect for a bill this huge. But here's the kicker. The answer is no. They didn't have to do any of that. The legal reason for the cancellation, stated right there in the document, was that it was done secara jabatan. And that's a phrase you're going to want to remember. So secara jabatan is the local term for something lawyers call ex officio. And what it means is that the authority, in this case the tax office, took action all on its own. They found the mistake in their own records and fixed it without the taxpayer even having to ask. And this timeline really shows you how it all played out. The wrong bill goes out in June 2025. Then, a few months later, the tax office finishes its own internal review on January 12, 2026. And get this, just one day later, they issue the official cancellation. The system literally corrected itself. Okay, so the debt was gone. Huge relief, right? But believe it or not, the story doesn't stop there. It actually got even better for the taxpayer. Let's look at the final numbers. So, first things first. That debt of over 43 million rupiah? Poof, gone, wiped out, completely reduced to zero. I mean, can you imagine the weight off their shoulders? But here's the next twist. In that time between getting the scary bill and the happy cancellation letter, the taxpayer, trying to do the right thing, had already started paying it off. They made a partial payment. And this is where the math gets really, really good. The original amount they owed was over 43 million. The new amount they owe is zero. But they had already paid over 4.3 million. So when you take what they paid and subtract their new balance of zero, you actually end up with a negative number, an overpayment. And what happens when you've overpaid your taxes? Well, you get a refund. They went from facing a life-altering bill to actually getting money back from the tax office. That is a complete 180-degree turnaround. So yeah, it's a pretty wild story, but it also has some really important lessons for every single one of us as taxpayers. Let's quickly break down the key takeaways here. So, what's the bottom line? First, these big, complex government systems can actually have powerful self-correction tools built right in. Second, this whole ex officio thing means you might not always have to fight an error. The system might just find it and fix it for you. Third, it's a huge reminder to read everything that comes in the mail because you might miss good news. And finally, it really shows how important it is that these agencies have their own internal checks and balances.
And here's one last really practical tip for you. A lot of official documents these days are signed electronically. See that QR code? You can scan it with your phone and it'll take you to a government website to prove the document is real. It's a super simple and powerful way to protect yourself from fakes.
You know, what this whole case really shows is that a process that seems totally overwhelming from the outside can have these hidden, taxpayer-friendly safeguards. We just uncovered one of them today, and it really leaves you with a pretty important question. What other rights and protections are out there that most of us just don't know about?